Hi, I'm Miles, and you're listening to the House of EdTech with my daddy, Chris Nessie.
Support for this episode of House of EdTech comes from my awesome supporters. Many thanks to Jeff Herb, Peggy George, Mark Grindell, Brent Warner, Dan Gallagher, and Jen Giffen. If you'd like to become an awesome supporter, go to chrisnessie.com/awesome. Coming up on episode 90 of the House of EdTech podcast, I've got two special guest hosts with me as we talk about ISTE 2017. I've got a special guest for the House of EdTech recommendation, which is going to add some much-needed functionality to Google Slides. I've got a double House of EdTech VIP. Thanks for joining me. Let's get started. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 90 of the House of EdTech podcast. I'm very excited to be recording this episode because I am not alone. I have two special guest hosts / guests. They're going to fulfill all the roles and everything that goes along with being here on the podcast. So without further ado, let's get right to our conversation, which is going to be all about ISTE 2017. And my two guest co-hosts for this episode are no stranger to the podcast. I have with me Derek Larson, who is a previous guest of the show on episodes 22 and 67. Say hello, Derek.
Hey, Chris. Hey, House of EdTech. What's up, guys?
Everything's good. Glad to have you here. And we also have with us Jen Giffen, who is one of the awesome supporters of the show. And she is no stranger to being a podcast guest. She hasn't been on this one yet officially, but she has been on the Google Teacher Tribe podcast, episode number 10, with Matt Miller and Casey Bell, which I'm very familiar with. So, Jen Giffen, welcome to the House of EdTech. How are you, dear?
I'm so great. Thanks for having me. It's you guys, Chris, you were my very first love of podcasts. So you got me totally hooked, and I'm really glad to be here finally on the show. It's one of my, if not my top faves. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for the kind words. And of course, I appreciate all of your support with the podcast. Thank you. So you two met at ISTE 2017 for the first time back at the end of June here. So how did you guys meet at ISTE? And how did the world become a smaller place?
So I'll start, I guess. So I was at ISTE this year. I did an Ignite on Sunday, and then was also doing a lot with Pastascope EDU. And so one of the things I was doing with Pastascope EDU was periscoping different events. And so I was in periscoping the Monday Ignite session. Miss Jen Giffen happened to be one of those, as well as a number of other phenomenal folks. And in that session, Alice Keeler was there to support a good friend of hers, Christine Pinto Beans online. And she, Alice was like, let's go get some lunch. And she got and said, Jen, you're coming with me, right? And then she said, Derek, you're coming with me, right? And so Jen and I were like, I guess when Alice asked, you just go. So we went and had some lunch, and that was amazing time.
That's right. When Alice Keeler invites you to lunch, you don't say no.
You just jump and go. That's fun.
Yeah, we hit up Denny's. It was pretty good. As you do when you're with Alice Keeler, you should go to Denny's. Yeah, and Derek and I connected. He came up to me at the end. And he's like, "How do I know you?" I'm like, "We must be connected on Twitter." And all of a sudden, we really realized that our bridge was the House of EdTech. And I said, "I know how I know you." I said, "You've been on House of EdTech." And he said, "I've been on House of EdTech." I'm like, "That's totally where I'm pretty sure you were on the episode where you and Chris talked about my dill pickles that I made in your Maker episode." And do you remember that, Chris? I sent in that picture.
Yes.
And I was dying, like, oh my gosh. And that was ISTE, I think, in general. If I were to sum it up, like what happened, like basically everyone I almost ever wanted to meet in any kind of edutech world was there. if I were to give any kind of advice to anyone who was going, I would say, you're going to make a schedule potentially if you're like me, because I'm pretty A-type. And then you're going to throw that out the window because Alice Keeler is going to invite you to lunch. And when you go to lunch with Alice Keeler, you're going to meet someone who doesn't follow Alice Keeler on Twitter, but does follow Derek Larson. So Derek won ISTE.
It was freaking amazing because Alice was just in typical Alice Keeler's like, you know who I am, right? And we're like, okay, here we go. She's like, nope, I don't know who you are. And we're like, oh, this will be fun. So I love Alice. Yeah, she's a great friend. But that's Alice's personality. And she's like, okay, let me follow you. Let's do this. Let me tweet it out. And this lady is just, she came in and sat down by herself. And Alice leaned over and said, you're not eating by yourself. You're here at ISTE. Come join us. And I'm like, yeah, there's a rule at ISTE. Nobody eats alone. Yeah. And sure enough, it was a great,
inclusive. Yeah, it was really great. I met a lot of people like that. I went to the Google Mixer, and I actually called one of my girlfriends back in Canada, and I said, I need your help. And she said, what? I said, you need to talk me off the ledge. She said, what's going on? And I said, I'm just going to start listing some of the people who are in the room with me here at the Mixer. And like, I don't know how to behave. This is like crazy. And so I started going, like, Casey Bell's in the room, and Matt Miller's in the room, and Eric Kurtz is in the room, and Holly Clark is in the room, and Tanya Averett is in the room, and Sylvia Duckworth is in the room. And I keep going. She's like, how are you functioning right now? I said, I really don't know. My biggest one was Eric. When I met him, I said, I really want to go to his session tomorrow. I know it's a bigger session. I'm going to know a lot of what he's talking about just by the nature of what I already do in my own practice and with my board. And my friend Mike was like, well, you don't need to go to a session. He's right there. And I was like, was taken aback. He grabbed my arm and he's like, come over here. And then Eric was like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, Jen. Oh, Jen, you're a virtual GIF on Twitter. I know you. I follow you. I saw your Ignite this morning. And he started talking to me, and I literally was like, can you just give me a second? And I turned around and I lay down on the floor in the fetal position. And he was like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just having a real big fangirl moment. You're just going to give me a minute right now. And then cut to the next night, and we did the EdTech karaoke, which was not really karaoke. It was like a full-on rock show. Derek and I had literally front row. We were like, chest to the stage up there, supporting all of our peeps from Flip. And he and I walked out, and there's Eric Kurtz, and I'm like, Eric, what are you doing here? And he'd been sitting up with the Canadian crew, like Michelle Armstrong and Sylvia Duckworth and Kim Polishuk and all these people, and Sandra Chow, and he's like, oh, the girls left, so I'm just gonna go back. I'm like, no, you're gonna come out. And so the guy the day before that I was freaking out about went out to a piano bar with me until 2:30 in the morning. It's just that kind of world when you go there. Everyone's like, yeah, let's go and have fun. And we sat and we chatted. He told me about his blog. So you're out and you're doing these like crazy things that you wouldn't do when you're like me and you have 3 little kids. You're not going out normally until 2 or 3 in the morning. But then you connect, and then, and since then, like Eric and I exchanged numbers, and we've been going back and forth with different ideas on blogs, and if I've needed resources, and all of a sudden, that world and that network becomes so much smaller. And that's what I loved about it, was that everyone was so willing to share their ideas and pay it forward and give so that students would be better, right? We can do better by them. And I think that's what I really loved about ISTE, was those connections that you can make with people and how willing they are to just give you things to make sure that kids are happy and kids are learning, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for.
I think that's a great way to look at it, and that's the way that everybody should look at it. And I think it's really cool that you went from first meeting somebody like Eric, being in the fetal position, and then you've got his number, you can call, you can collaborate, and you grew your personal learning network, by one more person who now you have that connection with. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's kind of that was for me for ISTE as well. Honestly, I kind of went knowing I was going to meet up with some Past the Scope EDU crew. So many to name, but Brian Romero Smith Jr., Senior, he was the number one guy. He literally picked me from the hotel, took me to Badge Summit on Saturday before ISTE, which was amazing. I want to thank you, Chris, for the ticket for that. Learned a ton, was able to get some different footage as well, met a lot of great people. You've got a few interviews there, I think. Maybe you might be able to play pieces of from that Badge Summit. And it just really showed how small the world really is, like Jen was saying, and the fact that these people who we communicate with online, whether it be through Voxer or Twitter or Facebook, whatever it is, it shows that you can actually have real relationships form, that when you meet up with them in person, it's like, we know each other. There's not that awkwardness other than you keep poking each other on the arm. Like, you're actually here in 3D. This is so cool. And that was a phrase that Matt Fratt kept saying a lot, Matt Frattali, is that we're meeting not in person, but we're meeting in 3D because we know each other. We've been hanging out with each other on all these different places, whether it's Flipgrid, whether it's Twitter, like I said, all these different tools or whatever. We know each other already. We've met each other. Now we're just actually meeting it in 3D in the flesh. And it was really, really cool to have that opportunity to meet all these people who I've known, just absolutely incredible. It was just amazing to sit down and actually sit and have a meal with them, get a big hug from them and hang out with them and realize that, hey, we have so much more in common than we even thought. And it's just a beautiful time to be with people. And the learning and stuff was incredible. But I hate to say it, my number one takeaway from ISTE, honest and truthfully, is being in the same room with people who you know and care about and want to learn from. Because the learning, you can do that all online, kind of from wherever. You don't have to be sitting in the same space with them. But you can't get that same feeling as being in the same space with them without actually being there.
This is the other thing with ISTE. Like, it is huge. And we walked in and we were like, okay, we have these 3 booths we need to go to. And the expo hall is ginormous. So we went in and we were like, okay, let's do this. And we're like, okay, we're going to go here. And we ended up stopping at 14 places because there was so much good and stuff you don't even know about. And that was my thing, right? When you're, really active on Twitter and when you're really connected, you think, okay, I know a lot of this, but there were so many things there for so many different, not only for teachers, but for like IT managers and for superintendents. It was just that in itself. Anyone who goes to ISTE, you need to dedicate a half day to that expo hall because it is fantastic.
And don't leave your expo hall visit for the last day. Do it earlier because you'll have more stuff you may walk away from. Lots of swag, lots of cool free stuff. But you go earlier in the conference, they have more of that left over, more of that available, and you may have a better chance of bringing some cooler stuff home.
That was my philosophy when I went to Philly a couple years ago. As we get deeper into you guys reminiscing, and it just makes me feel even more jealous and just really solidify the fact that I did miss out. Jen, what brought you from Canada, where you do work and do all the things that you do that are wonderful? What brought you to ISTE in 2017? And don't say a plane.
So my district said they would send 4 people. So I threw my name in. It's my first year. So I'm a digital literacy resource teacher. That's my actual title, which is sort of like an EdTech coach. It's my first year. I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to get to go. But I can throw my name in the hat because you never know. Maybe I will get to them. It was only 4 of us. And I got to go. I said, this is incredible. I can't believe that this is happening. I've never been to Texas. I've always wanted to go to ISTE. It was 100% on my bucket list. And, I got to go and I'm so thankful. And I don't know how I will ever # not at ISTE again. It really was quite the experience. And closer to home next year up in Chicago. So that's only really like an 8-hour drive from where I am.
It's still too far for me, so we're probably not going to meet until 2019 when it's back in Philly.
Okay, well, I look forward to that.
Derek, what brought you to ISTE in 2017?
So I've been trying to get to ISTE for the past 5 years probably. And the last 3 of them, I had a buddy in my district that said, hey, we're going to go because we helped to run a conference in my district. And he said, we're going to go and we'll totally use that conference budget, make it all work out. And every year it fell through. And I was like, this is never going to happen. And so I was at something for some digital citizenship planning for the DigCit Summit happening in Utah. And Jamie Donnelly was like, you need to submit an Ignite talk. And I said, Jamie, I'm not going to be there. She said, do it anyways. Submit it. And if they accept it, then that gives you a little bit of push maybe with your job and everything. And so I went ahead and submitted it. I thought, okay, whatever, Jamie, let's do it. And when I heard back that I got it, I thought, you're crazy. I've submitted it for ISTE before, never gotten through. And then I also applied to be an emerging blogger, which is funny because I have not had blogs come out other than the pre. I've had a lot of wild happen after ISTE, but I did a lot of periscoping throughout. So I had that media pass, and I felt like that kind of helped with what I was doing, and they knew I was going to do that. And so that helped bring the cost down as well. So there's something for you people who are looking for ISTE in the future. Check out their emerging EduBlogger package, because if you get on there, they actually will give you a reimbursement or pay for your admission to ISTE. And so that's actually a good way to do it. Just your actual door ticket in. And then I just talked to my wife and I said, I've got to go do this. And so we found a way to make the rest of it work out using some monies that will be coming in a little bit later for a keynote I'm giving, and robbed Peter to pay Paul. Got there, and it was literally a dream come true for me. Like I said, it was life changing for me though. I mean, I'm really looking at it and saying, okay, how do I do this for 18? Because once you go, it's hard to not go the next year and the future years, and so I'm hoping to be able to make that happen as well. Jen, what was the most fun single event you did?
That's a tough call.
I know, isn't it?
ISTE related, I loved the Ignite talks so much. And I think if someone said you could only go to one, and you know which one I would do, and I think they kind of rip you guys off, Derek, when they put the student Ignites with you. I know that you were in the same as my colleague Kim Polishuk, and yours, the teacher ones were so great. But if they did 3 separates, if they did the round 1, round 2 student, as I think was originally planned, I'd be sitting and listening to those student Ignites would hands down be the best. Like I had a colleague, Joanna Bull, there with me. And at one point she tapped me on the shoulder. She was sitting in the row behind me. And I turned around and she's not a really sensitive person. And she had tears streaming down her face. She's like, what's going on right now? The kids were so great. Like there was one little guy, and his name of course escapes me, but he's going into the 3rd grade. He was talking about how the coding club in his school has changed his life. And the inspiration that you can see, even in that one kid, that really is a call to action for us as teachers to continue to do what we're doing and iterate and make it even better so students can have that, was so phenomenally transformative. I loved that so much, listening to that student voice, because I'm always amazed when we talk about students and don't have student voice in it. If we really want to talk about students, then we need them there, or at least represented in some way, and not just like, okay, here's a worksheet that they did. It needs to be more than that. And so those Ignite talks in general, and especially the ones by the kids, were by far my favorite. Like I was in tears. I was tweeting like crazy about them. And I've gone back and watched a number of them again on different scopes and on different, Facebook pages and whatnot. So yeah, that would definitely be my favorite.
See, and I'm kind of the same way. Like I really, really enjoyed the Ignites, and not because I was part of those. That was fun. It was a great experience, but really the kids were very impressive. Curran D, who talks about Ditch Sick Kids, he's kind of like my nephew. I call him my nephew. I'm so close with he and his family, and he just gets up there, and the things he talks about, I'm just like, it's incredible. He's at a school that they're not allowed to connect anything online, but yet he goes home and he has all of these international connections of people he works with. And it goes to show me that there's really a problem in many schools where they're so scared. And I get it. We've got to make sure we're protecting students, but we have to also realize we're almost doing as much harm by limiting what they can do than if we would open up a little bit more. I always use the example, like when you learn to drive, at least here in the U.S., I don't know how it is in Canada, but you have to go through like a 6 or 8 week course. And then there's a whole bunch of practice hours, and it literally takes sometimes more than a year, 12 to 18 months to get your license these days. And that's because they have so much practice required. If we taught driver's ed like we do digital citizenship, a lot of times it's like here's a 1 hour assembly, go forth and conquer, right? And I'm like, what better place for practice than in a school? Let's open these things up. Let's know kids are going to mess up. Heck, adults are messing up left and right. Let's give these kids a chance to mess up in a place where we can help support and learn and mentor them. And Curran has that beautiful opportunity with his mom, Mary Alice, and what she's able to do with him and help him. He legitimately is able to do so much and connect with so many people and learn and grow in a situation that is so fluid, so open, and so authentic, much more than even just standard day-to-day stuff. And so I think I agree with you. I think of the sessions, that was probably one of my favorite parts. Although I got to say a close second would be Jenny McGarry's keynote address on was it Tuesday morning?
Yeah.
She was unbelievable. And I think I had close to 1,000 people watching that Periscope. And it showed. I have messages coming left and right throughout it. And it was spot on. I love the guy on Sunday who's the podcast guy, which Chris, you probably would have enjoyed that. It was very, very great. but I didn't get the education tie-in like I did with Jenny, because she got up there. She's been to ISTE. She's an educator, and she really shared, and it was very vulnerable in a couple of places. I thought, wow, this is a very, very powerful woman, very powerful educator. What a great example for all of us on how to be and how to really fire those around us.
I've opened that, like I've watched that 3 different scopes from different views 3 times now. I go back to that, and every time I listen to it, I take something a little bit different. Jenny, she knocked it out of the park. I do think the EdTech karaoke was one that was like unparalleled as well. Like you go in and there's all these teachers, and they have the A stage where you have to audition, and then the B stage that you can just go on and sing. And the A stage was a rock show, and the woman who won it came out. Susan, wasn't that her name? Derek, was that her name? Was it?
Yeah, she's a librarian.
I think. Anyway, she came out at the beginning, and she had sort of her hair up in a bunch. She's long gray hair, little woman, and she said, "Okay." And all of a sudden, they started into Bon Jovi's "Living on a Prayer," and we're like, "Oh gosh, where's this going?" And she just like everyone went bananas. And when they got to the finals, and she was the final presenter in the finals, and she said, "Okay, what are you going to sing?" And she just grabs the mic and she looks at the audience and she's like, "Proud Mary." And the place went banana cakes. Like it was on fire. Everyone's screaming. They're doing the hands out in front of them and the hands back and singing along. And it was an episode of Teachers Gone Wild, but in a great way, not in an inappropriate, like we've got to have a censored version of this one.
No, it was that the EdTech karaoke was a highlight for me. Also because 3 of my good buddies were up on that stage. 4 really. Yeah. Mary Jo Maddock came out at the very beginning. I don't know if you were there yet for Mary Jo, and she killed a beautiful rendition of Adele. And I feel bad, Chris, I don't have any video of that one, but it was so incredible. But Dean Gainey, who's an educator from Florida, Dean is very calm and
Dean
very chill.
Wonderful.
And he gets up there and does Michael Jackson Beat It. And it was like, whoa, where did this come from, Dean? And was just incredible. Claudio Zavala did something really, really great. I can't remember now. Very Latin-y flair. And I'm like, whoa.
Oh, what did he do?
I can't remember now. Brian Smith did some Al Green. Just again, gorgeous sounds. And then we end up having like 2 of those guys in the finals, along with the rocker librarian from who knows what. It was an incredible night because they have a full live band and the crowd is crazy. Yeah, Jen and I were literally up on the very front, like in that mosh pit area, right up on the stage, just having an absolute blast. Yeah. And those kind of things are important because we can learn and grow with each other, but they help us to kind of bond and kind of form those lasting relationships with each other outside of the day job.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to get together and laugh.
Oh, yeah. Lots of laughing.
Before we wrap up, and we will finish on a high note, so I'm going to ask you guys, I guess this would be more reflective, more critical. If you could change something about the ISTE experience, something you didn't enjoy, what might that be? And I will toss it over to Jen first.
I don't think there's anything I didn't necessarily enjoy, but there are things like, had I known then what I know now.
Okay, let's go with that.
So I went into it with a real mindset of this is a conference, so I will go to sessions. And so instead of going to sessions or only picking sessions, I would actually spend more time at playgrounds than I did. I heard that the Google Playground was phenomenal, and I didn't get there until it had closed. I really rushed through the poster sessions a few times because I was going to these sessions, and I would have liked that sort of one-on-one dialogue time. So I think with ISTE, you need to go into it and really realize it's not a conference, it's an experience. So it's not a sit and get, it's not going to be that. So if you don't go to any sessions, which sounds so weird, and I felt I needed to because my district paid for me to go and I felt I had to take something back. The stuff that I ended up taking back wasn't necessarily from those sessions. I had a couple that were great, but a lot of it was that, oh, hey, I saw this poster session on this, and did you know that you can do this and that, and to go in and actually physically play in the playgrounds. And so that's what I wish I had done. If I could go visit, past Jen, give her some advice, I would say go to one session at most a day and then go explore, sort of let let the tides take you where you're supposed to go. There's some serendipity, I think, with ISTE.
And actually, I would say that would be applicable of most any big conference you go to. So I think that's some sound perspective.
So I'm going to echo Jen. With planning this, I didn't go to a single quote unquote session. I did not sit through a single session. Everything I did was either like the Ignites. They had a thing called a 1 in 3, which I guess they are sessions in a sense, but they're not the sit down with one presenter kind of a thing. I didn't hit any of those. And I thought, okay, I'm going to seriously come out of this like lacking. But you know what? I did too much in rooms and official things as well. I felt like, the keynotes I think are huge, awesome. I love the Ignites. I love the 1 in 3s. These kind of big things. They had a thing called Tech Talks, and some incredible people there. Refrans Davis was one of the speakers in that one, and just getting a chance to hear Refrans in person was life changing for me because she's one of those people that I turn to online when I want to read something really thought provoking because that's what she does, and she is incredible. I would say make time for nothing. And what I mean by that is have open pockets in your schedule to go to, like Jen said, the playground, wander around the poster sessions, which I've always thought poster session, that's pretty boring. No, there is incredible stuff down there. Those people have put their heart and soul in some of these things. Very, very cool stuff. And it's huge. And lots and lots of goodies there. The other thing is just if you see somebody, talk to them. Don't be afraid of who they may be or may not be. Reach out and talk to people as you're waiting in line for things, as you're riding the escalator. Don't be so in yourself that you forget that the biggest part of a conference, I think the number one reason that we should have conferences is to have the face-to-face, because we live in a day and age where we can literally open up our phones, go to Twitter or go to somebody's blog and literally learn stuff. We don't have to go to a conference to learn anymore. The days of a conference as a learning place are dead because you can do that anywhere, anytime. But the conference, I think, is still very valuable because there's something to be said for the face-to-face appearance, the talking, the socializing, like Jen was saying, you make time for that. I know it's later in the evening and you might be tired. So pick one night that you go out and find some of those events or go for like 15, 20 minutes, have a little bit of social, and then get out and go get your rest because you got to rest. I did not sleep enough during the conference. I'm kind of feeling the effects, but so many things. I could literally talk for days about ISTE and just conferences in general, but the people experience, I think, is the number one key thing to take away from it is make time for people. And those serendipitous moments were the things that really stood out to me as my most favorite and prized moments from ISTE.
Thanks for making me feel bad about missing it, guys. I don't know what to say.
I took video for you, Chris.
Sorry,
I got you
Chris.
as much as I can get you, buddy.
We're going to give Derek and Jen a break, and we're going to move away from them. They can get a drink of water. And now we're going to come at you with this episode's VIP and recommendation. So let's do the House of EdTech recommendation. And now it's time for this episode's EdTech recommendation. And this is a very special EdTech recommendation because I think for the first time, I'm actually going to recommend something, but I'm not going to be the one to talk about it. And I've actually got the person who made it here with me right now. So I'm going to throw it over to Dennis Sheeran. Dennis is the author of Instant Relevance, Using Today's Experiences to Teach Tomorrow's Lessons. He's a fellow New Jersey educator, and he is with us right now to talk about a new, I guess, Google Slides extension add-on. And Dennis, first, welcome to the House of EdTech.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I've been putting the House of EdTech on my list of hopes and dreams for quite a while now, so it's pretty exciting that I get to be here.
I'd hate to see the rest of the list.
It's a long list.
There you go. So, Dennis, tell us about what you have created.
Well, it's actually a Chrome extension called Slides Sorter, and it came from the fact that a lot of people had been saying that, Google Slides isn't as good as PowerPoint. It doesn't do all the things PowerPoint does. And the main feature that they were using as an example of that was that it didn't have the slide sorter feature. And the slide sorter feature in PowerPoint, you just grab from one of their menus, and then it opens up a panel that shows you all of the slides in your entire PowerPoint presentation. You drag them around, you drop them, and then as soon as you close it, they're all updated. And they were right. Google Slides didn't have that. So I searched for a while. I looked around. I was looking at the standard tech sites that I like going to see if anybody had come up with anything. And it just turned out that they hadn't. So that's when I started looking into what it takes to develop an extension yourself. So I started looking through some Chrome extensions and some how to change them, how to build them. And I'll be honest with you, I got out of my league pretty quickly because this is something new to me entirely. So I reached out to a friend who I know had a lot more experience, and we put this together. And it just released yesterday in the Chrome Web Store. It's our new Slides Sorter extension, and it mimics that PowerPoint feature exactly.
What kind of time went into actually developing it once you connected with this other person and actually dug into what it takes to do something like this?
Well, on my end, ahead of time, I had started looking into researching how to build a Chrome extension, and I was really doing this from the ground up. I'd never built an extension before. And so that took a lot of time on my part to come to the point where I realized I'm at a spot here where it's out of my hands. And even in the book, Instant Relevance, it's an interesting crossover. There's a time I talk about I had a student's graphing a challenge, and they just couldn't do it. They couldn't make the graph. It was some curly Q pasta that we wanted to make. So we reached out to the math graphing group that we use, Desmos, and asked them, can you help us? And within 12 hours, they'd graphed an incredible three-dimensional animated analysis of our graph using a lot of linear algebra and cool math stuff. So that's when I realized it was time for me to reach out to somebody who knew so much more about the basics and beyond than I did. And start to finish, it was about a 2-week process after that.
2 weeks doesn't sound that bad. Has this opened the door for you to create more extensions since you've had success here now with the first one?
So we're looking now at adding on another one. There's one other request that we get that was another PowerPoint feature that I'd love to add into my miniature arsenal of Chrome extensions, which would just be 2 of them at that point. And it's the hide slide feature. Within a lot of Google Slides, a lot of the time you have one presentation and you want to alter it a little bit for another group, or you want to shorten it for a shorter opportunity to present, and you make a copy of that presentation and then you change all the slides. And the feature that PowerPoint has is just the opportunity to right-click on a slide, hide it from the presentation, and then when you present, it just doesn't show. So I'm looking at trying to develop that one to add into the Google Slides extension library.
I would like to be first in line for that one as well, because I actually just did that yesterday, that I'm presenting with somebody virtually, and I'm using a slideshow that I've created previously and used in other places. And I have a co-presenter this time, and I said, go in, add stuff about you and anything else you want to contribute to the presentation. But again, I had to make a copy, give them the editing rights. I still got that original, but I had to go through this other process to get somebody else involved.
Oh, yeah, you don't want to see how many copies of a single presentation I have in my Google Drive. That's why they give you unlimited space.
There you go. So, actually, as I talk to you today, it's only been released for maybe 24 hours. What kind of analytics are you seeing? Do you have billions of downloads on this thing, or how's it looking?
I haven't had a chance to check the analytics yet. I'm a single dad today. My wife is visiting some family, so I'm home with my kids. So once I get a chance to, I'll run some of the tracking on that and see. But from the Twitter response that I've gotten out there so far, there's been a lot of positive, the thank yous. We've been waiting for this one. I tried it out and it works perfectly. That's the kind of stuff you want to hear when you put an extension out there. So I'll tweet out those analytics to you and let you know how it's doing.
Again, I've had you here for a couple minutes. Again, we're going to get you on here to do a full episode. So this is Dennis Sheeran Light here on the House of EdTech, recommending his brand new Google add-on that gives Google Slide the functionality to pull up all your slides and be able to visually sort them and drop them and rearrange them. Thank you, Dennis, for a couple of minutes here on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Living the dream.
And real quick, how can people get in touch with you on Twitter, website? Where can they get Instant Relevance?
Sure, they can follow me on Twitter at MathDennisNJ. That's just Dennis with one N. I've had to explain that since I could speak. You can find information about me on my website, DennisSheeran.com, and you can just look up Instant Relevance or my name, Dennis Sheeran, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you can find the book Instant Relevance there.
Awesome. Dennis, thank you so much for a few minutes.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
And we've got a double VIP in episode 90 of the podcast. Congratulations to Cade Summers and Michelle Shelton. You are both the House of EdTech VIP. Cade Summers is a Hoosier at heart. He is transplanted in the beautiful Appalachian foothills of eastern central Alabama. He's lived a life of change with previous work in the ministry and management. Cade is now committed to ministering to and managing the minds of high schoolers in Oxford, Alabama, as an English teacher, instructional designer, e-learning instructor, EdTech enthusiast, basketball coach, husband, and dad. He is Cade Summers on Twitter, CadeSomers. He blogs about English at smorenglish.edublogs.org. And his partner in crime, Michelle Shelton, has taught English for over 17 years. Over the course of her career as an educator, she has taught at both the junior high and high school levels. She earned her master's in secondary education and educational specialist degree from the University of Alabama. Along with Cade, Michelle currently teaches English at Oxford High School, again, in Oxford, Alabama. She periodically blogs about life as an educator at her blog called Bloggin' in the Rain, and that's blogginintherain.wordpress.com. And she loves to participate in educational chats on Twitter. You can connect with her at Shell617, and that's ChellShel617. Together, this dynamic duo have also started a relatively new podcast, so you can't go wrong there. And their new podcast is called Across the Hall, which can be found at acrossthehallpodcast.com. A little bit about the podcast. Across the Hall is a podcast created mainly for English teachers who want to know how to use various tech resources and strategies in their classrooms, but need some specific ideas geared towards the ELA curriculum. While the show may be geared towards English teachers, you will also find some great ideas that can be applied in other classrooms as well. So again, check out the podcast, acrossthehallpodcast.com. The podcast is also on Twitter, at acrossthehall, and the Twitter handle for the show, it's not an O in across, it's a 0. So it's ACR0SSTHEHALL. Congratulations to Cade and Michelle. You are the House of EdTech VIP. Continued success with the brand new podcast. And if you're not connected with Cade and Michelle or listening to their podcast, you need to do that today. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the House of EdTech. Super huge thanks to my guest and guest co-host today, Derek Larson and Jen Giffen. Thank you guys for being here. Did you guys have fun?
A blast. Thanks, Chris.
So much fun. So much fun to connect with friends.
Thanks for being here. And of course, a huge thank you to Dennis Sheeran for taking time to share with us his Google Chrome extension. Again, there'll be a link in the show notes over at chrisnessy.com/90 where you can get that Chrome extension and add it to your slides lineup today. You can visit the show notes for this episode. Just go to chrisnessy.com/90 where you can leave a comment on the show notes, and myself and Jen and Derek will check those out. Or you could send me a message by going to chrisnessy.com/feedback. And if that's not your thing, then by all means, please connect with us on Twitter. That's the fastest way to get in touch with me, and I know Derek and Jen are huge on Twitter. I am Mr. Nessie. Derek, how can people get in touch with you?
So at Lars3EB, LARS 3EB. If you are in any social network, look for that. You'll probably find me. Twitter is my best way to find me, though.
And I will also say check out edtechbabble.net, where Derek likes to blog from time to time.
That's right. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. Jen, where can people connect with you online?
You can find me on the Twitters at virtualgif, GIFF, from my last name, Giffen. And you can also find my blog, which I'm sort of a sporadic blogger as well, at virtualgif.com.
Derek and Jen, they enjoy the podcast. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, number one, my first priority is go tell somebody else about this podcast. I talk about it. I know Jen and Derek, you guys are always talking about the podcast and tweeting about it. Rate and review the podcast on iTunes, all those wonderful things. You can be like Jen Giffen, who is right here. She's an awesome supporter, just like Peggy George and Mark Grindell and Dan Gallagher and Jeff Herb and Brent Warner. If you are interested, you can go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the House of EdTech is going to be, of course, episode 91. and that's going to come out on August 6, 2017, where I will give you the previously promised conversation with Nate Nagel. So look forward to that. Until next time, thank you for learning with me and Jen and Derek. Say goodbye, everybody.
See you later.
Bye, everybody.
And of course, let's try and do this together. Using technology isn't difficult.
Just give it a try.
The House of EdTech is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more, go to edupodcastnetwork.com.